Well, welcome to our first panel for today. I'm Captain Danielle Higson, and I'm part of the Naval War College faculty and staff. Our panel today is to discuss allyship, which is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and fortunate this is my second time moderating this panel. But last year we were in Pringle, this year we're in the big auditorium, so hopefully that's showing the popularity that this topic is gathering. And as I hope you've noted yesterday, several of our keynote speakers mentioned allyship and the importance with WPS. But allyship, I would argue, is much bigger than just WPS. And it's much bigger than just talking about women. It's about talking about a dominant group and the smaller. It's being a duck amongst a bunch of geese. How does that person feel? How do we bring out their diversity? How do we bring out their thoughts? And having that allyship, having that support from the dominant group. So a lot of people talk about when they were at the symposium, we've heard a lot of feedback on, well, I'm not exactly sure how this applies to me specifically. Well, allyship is something everybody can practice. It's how we can be good teammates and leaders. It's how we're going to build the strongest teams that we need in strategic competition. So I think we have a great panel to talk about these issues today. I'm very excited to hear from them, but really what we want to concentrate on is a discussion. So hopefully this will garner some good questions, and we will kick it off with Captain Almonte, who's the N5 at NAVCENT.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for being here, for choosing this panel. You don't have to walk anywhere, but I won't believe that that's the reason you stayed here. This is my third opportunity to speak at this symposium, and I want to thank Dr. Yamin very much for moving it from May to December, because nobody likes Newport in May. Hint, hint. I have great memories of Newport. I started my career here 30 years ago over at the Naval Academy Prep School across the river, and this is where in my notes I have this thing to insert a joke about the fact that I don't look that old. But this morning, as I caught my reading glasses and my gray hair trying to get at my notes, I decided I would just leave that joke out. I also met my husband here, who's in the audience and has promised to be very quiet during my speech, and then during questions and answers, he won't have any. I met him 20 years ago. I'm still in the Navy, and we're still married, so clearly this place has a special place for me. But I'll get to it because I'm known to love a microphone, and there is a young woman in the front row who has a sign and has been told to let us know when we have overstayed our welcome on our microphones. So the 2022 National Military Strategy reads, adapt now or lose later. Adapt or lose. It goes on to direct the services to modernize, strengthen and integrate and incorporate discipline and fortitude in the services. Now, if you read the National Military Strategy, it's referring to equipment and tech. But I challenge you to convince me or yourselves that those words do not apply every bit as much to allyship and leadership within the military services. Modernize, strengthen and integrate, incorporate discipline and fortitude. Weapons are easy to modernize. They're easy to strengthen, and they're pretty easy to integrate. But as we all know about ourselves and each other, humans are less adaptive than machinery. It takes extra effort. It takes extra thought and care and empathy to learn how to integrate yourself and to instill discipline in yourself, and certainly do that for others as well under your purview and under your leadership. As a service member, your rank does not bestow power. Your rank bestows responsibility and authority, no power. Authority and responsibility that is entrusted in you by your nation for service to your nation. That's the only reason you have it. It's not for yourself. It's for what you can do for your country with that authority and with that responsibility. The power you are capable of wielding comes from your ability to be an ally, not from rank or perceived superiority because you're part of the majority, but because you understand that to strengthen and integrate the members of your organization is the greatest professional achievement you can ever have. Service to your nation as an ally, to its sons and its daughters, that is empowering. We heard yesterday about women's cognitive ability. Dr. Yamin mentioned that women have a greater cognitive ability than men. And I'm not sure what this says about me, but I went home and had to Google that. And it is an ability to perceive and understand the emotions of another, to rationally understand another person's thoughts, feelings, and perspective. And I'm not going to embarrass you guys by asking how many married men in here thought, oof, my wife does not do that. And then those of you who thought, oh, my wife does that. But I want you to be honest with yourselves about whether or not you can and where your strengths are, because it's true. Your ability to see past your immediate knee-jerk reaction and think about why a person is or acts or is motivated to do the things that they do is essential to becoming an effective ally. Cognitive empathy or no, I have never had a female mentor. Not because I didn't seek one out, but because early 1990s and early 2000s, the United States Navy did not have a lot of senior females running around to even offer themselves as mentors. But one thing I can tell you is that when women come together, we tend to commiserate with one another, to share stories of difficulty, of harassment, of marginalization, and much worse. And there's a place for that, because it's the kind of empathy that lets a person know you are not alone, that there's other folks out there going through the same things that you are. And clearly you don't have to be a woman to have feelings of things that are happening to you that are happening to others around you. But it's not enough. Empathy for one another is not enough, and commiseration is certainly not enough. So the inspiration comes from the so what, the what then, the what did you do about it? The demonstration by action and example that yes, while I can commiserate with you, I choose not to for more than a moment, because instead I choose to inspire and to lead despite what I can commiserate about. That's terrible grammar, but you get what I'm saying. So that's where the men in the audience come in. Most of you cannot relate. I'm happy for that. The more people who cannot relate to being marginalized, the better in my mind. So I've told my husband a few of my stories. My daddy says you don't belong here. I'm just the man to take you down a peg or two. I know you're married, but F it, you're hot, let's do this. Stories that I've had during my career in the Navy. And he had no idea that this kind of thing was going on. He wasn't aware of it. Even in the ranks of leadership he had in the Navy, it didn't rise to him and it didn't come to his attention. But what he said was women have to look over their shoulders to wonder if they're safe from attack by a shipmate. You should be safe to serve your country and focus on your jobs. And that's what 99.9% of us just want to do. I'm going to tell you a more recent story, and this is the only full one I'll tell you. And I was at a conference about 2 months ago in Tampa. About a 3-day conference. I met an 06 there, who shall remain unnamed. And he, at the end of the conference, gave me a note. I didn't think much about it. He said, "Great to meet you." I put it in my coat pocket, my jacket pocket, and went home to Bahrain. And I was unpacking my suitcase in front of my husband, and the note popped out of my pocket, and I thought, oh yeah. So I opened the note, and it said, "Smart, sexy, and fun to look at. Look forward to seeing you again." And my first reaction was, I am too old for this crap. My second reaction was, man, I wish I hadn't opened that in front of my husband. And my third reaction was, there goes another one. There goes another ally, there goes another friend, there goes another colleague, because he cannot be any of those things. He's on his second marriage, by the way. That's all I'll tell you about him. You need to understand that the men around you, gentlemen, the men around you still do that kind of thing. And even though you're not aware of it, what you can do, what does make a difference, is when you decide to be, no matter what else is going on, the energy and the inspiration to the marginalized folks. And by marginalized, I'll just say the majority, or the minority, I'm sorry, of the people around you. And a lot of the times that's the women. When a man steps up to energize, to be an active ally in the human development process, it is absolutely invaluable. The male mentors I have had, who have long since retired, most of them, and are still great friends to me, have just been an inspiration through my entire career. They've been wonderful human beings. I'd love to have a female mentor. It's a little too late for me now, but gentlemen, it's never too late for you to step up and be a mentor to the women around you. So why do I put that extra emphasis on you? Because when young women look around and they say, is this the place for me? What the heck am I doing here? This is not what I thought it was. They'll find another woman to commiserate with, and that won't pull them up out of it. That won't necessarily inspire them to keep at it. It might, but it might not. When you reach down and say, you've got this, get back in there, I've got your back, and you use lots of sports analogies that really annoy us, it's very inspiring. And we look for that. We really need that. So I say that this kind of get back in there leadership and inspiration works for me because I'm a full-fledged supporter of the damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead kind of mentoring. I see someone who rises up to be a speed bump in front of me and I think, that's why I have turbo on my pickup truck. I'm gonna hit that speed bump like it deserves to be, and I'm gonna keep going. And that's what women need to do. But that's not what inspires each and every one of us. So us as leaders, it is incumbent upon us as leaders with the responsibility and the authority bestowed on us and entrusted to us by this nation to figure out what your audience, what your command, what the person next to you does need. It may not be damn the torpedoes. It may not be a emotional pat on the back, it may be something else, and you have to expend. It is incumbent upon you, a requirement for you to figure out what they need, to push them forward, and to integrate effectively that human being into service to this nation. So, in closing, before the 10-minute little pink sign pops up in front of me, is the nation has placed some pretty amazing people in our care. If you ever have the opportunity to sit in a classroom in ROTC, any kind of ROTC class, when you speak to college kids who are getting ready to commission into service, and you listen to the dreams they have of this country, it is absolutely inspiring. It is absolutely inspiring. I took a class across the road the other day, a senior leadership class, but my husband, being the kind of guy he is, he found an OCS graduation and he went and crashed it just to see what it was like to watch young junior officers put on that hat at commissioning, get their stripes from their family members, and move forward with those dreams. Somewhere along the line, someone will try and take those dreams away from them, and someone will try and build them up. Make absolute certain sure you are the person that is reaching out to build them up. At the same time, because this is a two-sided coin, I want to tell you it's incumbent upon you to be worthy of that effort by others. It is incumbent upon you to develop what the National Military Strategy calls discipline and fortitude, and be the human being and the officer worthy of being pulled up by others because you inspire them. Strengthen and integrate discipline and fortitude. I think the National Military Strategy was onto something. They just didn't know that it should be applied to humans because I wasn't asked to be on the staff. But next time when I am, it will apply to humans as well as technology. Thank you. I appreciate that applause, but I'll note for the audience that it was greater applause for the fact that there were going to be snacks during the break up here. So I'll just attribute it to the fact that the size of the audience.
Well, thank you, Christa, for those honest comments and representing the smaller group of the women in the military and some of the things, the struggles that we face. And I liked your comments talking about active allyship, because I think there's not many out there who will say, of course I'm an ally to women, but it's that active, those actions that you take that help support and build up the women. You know, there's mentors, but it's even more than mentorship, and I think we'll get more into that. And also, I think it was mentioned there about women need to be good allies. Dr. Joan Johnson-Freese was going to be on our panel, but unfortunately was pulled away for some personal issues. But she was going to talk about women being good allies to other women, that in her book, Women versus Women, the case for cooperation talks about how women tend to compete, and it's because of the way things have happened through history and the societal things we grow up with, and how we need to consciously be good allies to each other as women. So for our next panelist, we have Dr. Curtis Bell, who is our Director of Maritime Security and Government Staff Course and Associate Professor in International Programs Department, to give us the academic and the science behind this.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. Admiral, good morning. And Dr. Yamin, thanks for an invitation to come back to support the Women, Peace, and Security Symposium. I look forward to it every year. In 2024, we have it twice, which is great. And I'm happy to be back to discuss allyship because I do think this is an important issue. At the last symposium, when I talked about allyship, I used my time as an academic. I get to do this. I fight with words sometimes, and I pushed back on the language of allyship some, because I think especially in a military environment where we think very carefully about alliances and allies and all of the implications of those words, it may not convey the best message for us. It puts an emphasis on grand promises of costly, self-harming action in defense of partners. When really, I think what we mean by allyship can also be a quiet, unspoken, gradual, cumulative contribution to an outcome. I still believe that, but the context has also changed pretty considerably over the last year since we've had the last symposium. And many of the topics that we talk about that grouped in as diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're a little more controversial today than they were. It is a different environment, a different context that we're speaking in, including at the highest levels of the DoD. And that has me rethinking my approach to allyship a bit as well. So I wanted to share a different angle, some different thoughts on this. We study alliances at the War College. We think really carefully about the history of alliances, and your curriculums talk about the roles that they've played in wars, and we spend many, many seminars discussing the current alliances we have. We know what makes alliances successful. We know why sometimes alliances fail, and I thought perhaps there are some lessons from all of these studies on military alliances that can apply to this thing that we call male allyship as well. So everyone loves a good triptych, so let me try to summarize this in three main points that I think about, lessons that might transfer over. The first of these is that we know that strong alliances are fundamentally based on a clear and shared goal. They're not wishy-washy promises. They're often articulated around a specific need, a shared interest. And alliances are stronger when that interest is made clear to everyone involved. Now, when an alliance does not define its goal and what it's against, it becomes a difficult alliance to defend. It becomes an easy alliance to attack. It allows others to define the interests. We see this. There are a reason that alliances have clear goals, red lines, and I think we can apply this lesson to male allyship as well. It's also important to note that the goals of alliances can grow and change. So a clearly stated goal today does not mean that that goal cannot evolve with the changing environment in time. So if we look at NATO, an alliance that was initially formed with one very specific threat in mind in the Soviet Union, that over time has expanded to defend a broader set of ideas about the international system in different geographies around the world. It's really broadened out, its membership has broadened, but it still was defined clearly up front, and that's been helpful. I work in the area of maritime security, so let me give you another example from my line of work. In many regions of the world, countries that don't necessarily see eye to eye on everything, and in some cases have very complicated relationships, what my middle school age children call situationships, I've learned. they can still, with a narrowly defined goal, form a tight alliance around a specific issue, like piracy, and then build on the success and the trust that that engenders to expand out, so that now they're cooperating on fishing, they're cooperating on maritime domain awareness. They've built enough trust to recognize a broader set of interests. So how do we apply this to male allyship? Another thing that I've talked about in previous symposiums that have come here is the emphasis on representation. Representation is a critical goal, but I would also suggest that it's not a productive short-term goal for male allyship. I think the goal really needs to be inclusion, and I'll be specific about why that's the case. Inclusion, to me, means that there's a culture, there's an environment where everyone feels welcome, regardless of what the numbers say, regardless of what the representation is. We can have inclusion without representation. And this is critical, and I think it's a good, finite goal for allyship, because in most complex organizations, Department of Defense included, representation is the work of very few. But inclusion and fostering that sense can be the work of every person, every day, and pretty much every action. What I see is that if an emphasis up front is on representation, that allows people to put their hands up and say, I don't work in HR, I don't do hiring, I don't write these policies, these are established outside of Newport. But if we define us around inclusion, that can be productive for everybody immediately in the short term. So in the same way that our military alliances have begun with a finite goal that people can rally around and then expand out, I would suggest male allyship can be thought of in a similar way. And defining it that way prevents others from defining it differently. A second lesson from alliances as we look around is that to increase their reliability, it's important to make sure they're grounded on more than long-term promises and contingencies and what-if scenarios. It's very easy for a man to say, well, if I saw something egregious, I would step up and do something. But alliances built on these kinds of grand promises about future threats that may or may not happen, they don't mean as much to us. Going back to NATO again, there's a reason that we have short-term and quantifiable benchmarks so that we recommit to each other our shared interest in this alliance. Specifically, this benchmark of 2% of spending on GDP, all of the military exercises that we do together, all of the little things that we regularly do to reassure NATO allies that this is still meaningful to us. So I would challenge the men, if your allyship consists of that future promise, this idea that if something egregious happens, if a red line happens, you can count on me, I'm called into action, how can you make that alliance stronger? How can you strengthen that commitment? That's going to be very personal, and it's going to depend on your line of work. For me, as a college professor, it's very easy to say women make great intellectual contributions to national security. It's a more meaningful commitment to myself and to my students if I track, am I assigning readings written by women? It's very easy. But by doing that, I'm making sure that my alliance commitment doesn't atrophy, which is a threat to any reliance, whether we're talking about allyship in this context or military alliances. And then finally, a third lesson. Let me make sure I remember my third lesson. Yes. It's different when you get up here. The language of alliances is very meaningful. A healthy alliance is not discussed as a sacrifice that the strongest members make to the weakest members. It's a recognition that there is mutual benefit, right? This is not altruistic. Stronger parties don't join military alliances out of the goodness of their hearts. And men, I think overall, we're okay people. I think we're very, very okay people. But don't be an ally for an altruistic reason. Recognize the mutual benefit that comes from this. Yesterday, I really enjoyed listening to Her Excellency, the President of Kosovo, speak. And one of the things that stood out to me, as someone who focuses on our international partners and allies, was the emphasis that she put on how Kosovo has, through the alliance, gone from being a net importer of security to an exporter of security. And I thought that is a wonderful example of what we're talking about in an alliance. There are going to be members with more leverage, with more power, with more voice. There are going to be members with less that may need to import a lot of the goods of that alliance. But through that investment, we now see Kosovo exporting that security in the same way that if we really invest in inclusion, representation, a lot of what WPS stands for, underrepresented groups, those with less voice, less power, will be empowered and enabled to be contributors. So I would encourage you to think of that parallel as well. So with that, I want to do my small act of allyship, which is ending on time and allowing others with less voice in the room to have more Q&A time. So I'll end my remarks there and turn it over to my other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Curtis, for those remarks. Really like your emphasis on inclusion, that really one of the things we talk about is that we need to retain people. Well, what's one of the things for retaining people is for them to feel included, to feel that they are valued. And so allyship is critical to that inclusion. So thank you. And next we have General Tracy, who's the president of Marine Corps University and a commanding general of Education Command, also a War College alum. He was also part of the Naval Command and Staff and the malls here.
Yeah, two times. And now I'm up here. So be afraid. Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm glad you turned out. I realized you were ordered here. So, but I do appreciate the opportunity. Admiral Walker and Yamin, just tremendous opportunity here and very humbling and a thrill. I'm not sure you were aware what you were signing up for when you gave me the microphone, but here we go. So I had I've been trying to improve myself, and so when I was here twice, I spent a lot of time entertaining myself and others by asking outrageous questions and answers. I felt like it was just me and the person at the podium. We were the only two people in the room. I tried not to do that. Sat on my hands down here, but I had so many answers to the questions as well as other questions I wanted to ask. I had prepared comments, but now I'm just going to go back through the entire time and say all the things I wanted to say. The question that is like in the elephant in the room, for those who have been ordered here, running a university, I know this. Most of you are asking yourselves, like, why am I in here? What does this have to do with me? Especially since this, now I'm looking out, is predominantly a male audience, right? You're like, and then I can also tell when I look at you for how many of you are on your phones. You've already decided that the answer to that question was that I shouldn't be here and that this is not well on my time, so hence I'm going to stare in my lap, right? So let's first begin and address that, all right? I am gonna make this, try and drive it home on a personal level for each one of you, okay? One, you need to recognize the power imbalance that is inherent not only in our society, but heightened and more intense in a military hierarchy in which we exist, right? And before we talk about allyship within the military, we're gonna first talk about how this works with our spouses and how this is driving many of our comrades out of the service and what the effect is going to be on you when you get your orders, which should be here momentarily, right? So we inherently have a power imbalance, right, socially and economically between men and women, right? This is heightened as one of those people join the service. Talented people marry talented people, right? And then you enter into a system that PCSs you between 1 and 3 years, and it will accelerate the better and more talented you are. That leaves one person who struggles to gain and maintain acceptable economic opportunities. As this proceeds forward into the future, there is a grosser and grosser divergence of that power and economy schism or delta, right? So at some point, and then perhaps children are introduced into this, which the primary caregiver societally still remains predominantly the woman, right? Which further reduces economic opportunities and accelerates that delta, right? And probably many of you are like, honey, shush the kids, I'm working on this S&P paper, right? Is going on, right? So that you're driving that both societally, socially, internally, interpersonally, right? Is reinforcing this power imbalance, right? And you arrive at some point where like 06, 05, in which the lesser of the two in the economic situation is now bound to you, regardless of how they're treated, that essentially they'll have to have a severe economic step down if they're to divorce, right? So this is like brass tacks. So what this means is if you, right, and now because of that delta, now you're seeing the space for, any type of misbehaviors or, abuse, right? And the one economically disadvantaged is stuck, right? Now, if that one can see into the future and is realizing how this is going to play out, right? And says, hey, I'm not going to buy into the program that is going to keep me economically challenged, reduce my capabilities. All the Marines in the room, you guys are Boyd acolytes, so you've read Patterns of Conflict, which the first paragraph of Pattern of Conflict says, an individual sentient being will make decisions in order to create greater agency and autonomy. That is the foundational first sentence of our entire doctrine of maneuver warfare, which the Navy has just discovered, right? Right? So that spouse, right? Let's say it's the spouse. But number two in the economic delta, if they can see into the future, which they can because talented people marry talented people, right? Realize this isn't going to go well for me as this plays out. So at some point, you get offered an ultimatum that says, get out or we're over. And hopefully they're making that decision if they can see far enough into the future that's pre-children, because that also limits agency. All right, now, why is this important to you? One, it's about to occur if it hasn't already. All right? Second, for the smarter ones in the group, they already had that discussion and they're not in here. All those empty seats left. All right? All the Leftwich Trophy nominees in 2015 got out because family, spouse, PCS, right? For those of you who don't know, Leftwich Trophy is like United States Marine Corps' Heisman Trophy for war, right? It's like the best, it like guarantees you 06 command and a seat at the Naval War College. Like, they're not here, all right? So now what's that mean? So more and more people are having this conversation back there, all right? We're short 60 lieutenant colonels and we're short 30 colonels. So we're gonna have this talk about talent management, blah, 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 right? Hey, there's 30 gaps at 3 MEF and you're going. We appreciate where you think you want to go, but we got holes and they need to be filled because these people aren't here, all right? So this is why this is important to you, because we have a systemic problem. All right, well, what's that? Well, that's a super huge problem. How could I fix this? You're talking about a societal problem. Well, some of you are going to go and do budget things, and you're going to participate in the real war, which is POM, right? you're going to come to a place where it's like Rogue Nemesis missile or a CDC, all right? For those of you, like really head in the sand, that's the Child Development Center. Hopefully we all know that. Right, so CDC versus Rogue Nemesis, the Marine Corps will continue to purchase Rogue Nemesis systems, right? And I'm watching it play out right now. And then you going in, it's a systems problem. But you can see how the CDC maps to the patriarch, to the system, to the divergence, to the economics, right? How the PCS cycle maps to this. And so we have a self-perpetuating system that's grinding our retention down, which then has a death spiral effect because now you're like, I'm not going to 3MEF, right? I'm gonna get out, right? For next year's class will be fewer seats. All right, enough on that. I only answered one question. I got 10 of them. All right, we're gonna wrap it up. All right, allyship. I'm just gonna give another thing. Like, I wanted to give you things that you could write down in a book, laminate, take to the field, right, give something. All right, I'm gonna give you 3 things. 1, recognize the patriarch. Recognize there's a system of divergence. I call this, who's the jerk at the Christmas party? All right? Every social setting, somebody is the jerk, right? And if you go to a Christmas party and you don't know who the jerk is, it's you, okay? And that's okay. You just have to recognize that, okay? And to see that and probably do something about it, you have to step back and kind of observe the social thing from above, right? And be able to see the interactions, the power dynamics, understand your role, your place in it. For better or for worse, how you walked in, people knew what your rank was, knew your social status, they know where, right? And if not, you can feel them suss it out in the convos, right? And the hierarchy is being established. Understand that, see it, look at it, and then you can manipulate it, hopefully for good, okay? 2, this one's super basic, but wicked important. I debated whether or not to even say this. Never check anyone out. Like, I don't know a better word for this, like oogling or whatever. Never, ever, ever do it, ever. Anyone, like eye contact, constant. It is the single greatest torpedo to anything positive you want to do, like moving forward. And I'm just hoping, like the whole story about the note in the pocket thing, like that, if we have to even talk about that, like I'm appalled and we should just, she just mouthed that it was a Marine. Yeah, no pressure. I have a spy at social settings that upon my return gives me these are the dirt bags at the party note, right? Every social, and then also when it says, and you're the jerk. But seriously, like, you're not getting that intel, but that intel is being collected on you, right? So, and then a corollary to that is, like, maintain eye contact with the person you're talking to and don't look over their shoulder at somebody better who may be there, okay? That is not as bad a thing, but as a new general, and I now have to go to these things with like 3 stars and 2 stars, they're constantly looking over my shoulder. And I keep telling them, like, nobody is more interesting to talk to than me, so cut it out. Like, I don't care what their rank is. Also, I'm going to this WPS thing, and who knows what I'm going to say. All right, this is the next most important thing, and I got to turn this over for questions because I'm super curious. The part about allyship that we're leaving out of the discussion is like, it's a like handbook, like do's and don'ts. What you need is a real mission, a real thing, a goal that you've articulated for the team that we have to go to A to B. Everyone, we have to go from A to B. Everybody on board. Come on, we're in for the big win, right? And then you can watch the power dynamics of who is messing up the mission of moving from A to B. And then you can begin to manipulate that, right? Just hey, we're going to Bala-Catan, which is a huge exercise in the Philippines. You guys know that, right? And we're going to accomplish these objectives, 1, 2, 3. Planning starts now, go, right? And then some person is not joining the table, or some person is not talking, right? And you're like, hey, you have a very important job here. You have to get in here into the mix. And then they say like, well, I'm not comfortable, and it's, and then, okay, I will help you, right? But until you have the mission and the thing to go from A to B, right, you can't begin to manipulate one. The problems won't illuminate, they'll be right? The second thing, and the ambassador from the UN yesterday was like, keep the troops busy. No, I would say, give the troops a mission and then put the fear of being fired because they're not accomplishing your objectives that are clear. They have to be clear, they have to be measurable. You have to fire people, hold them accountable, right? And then they start to work together, right? And then you point out, hey, that person, like that's the logistician, like you're not gonna win and you're gonna get fired unless they're in the group and you're right talking and like building the thing, right? So you had to, in order to get after allyship, step 1 is creating measurable missions to accomplish on a timeline that you can then hold people accountable to. It makes the dynamic present itself, and then you can manipulate the dynamic.
Thank you, sir, for those remarks. And before we kick it over to questions, you had shared with me one scenario that happened to you, I believe it was Afghanistan when you were commander, about why the diversity of thought is so important to you.
Thank you, Captain Higson. I have a WTS team at Marine Corps University, they're down front, and when we first met, they were sussing out whether or not I was like into that, like this, is he's saying the right things, but do we believe him? I am motivated to do WPS out of great motivators: fear, shame, guilt, and self-loathing. That's what makes Tom Brady good, so. So it was actually Iraq, 2007 in February. We were in the Haditha Triad. It was extremely violent. It was a confluence of many bad things that occurred, including a massacre. This post-massacre, I always like to add that in any war story about Haditha. At any rate, we were winning, and we had real good mojo. Company commander, we had good chi, and then we've been there for 4 months. We had first we had sniper problem, we had a IED problem. We kind of nixed those, but now we're on to suicide bombing problems. Anyway, so they're like, hey, we're gonna send you some help, and we're gonna send you these female searchers to help search the thing. We had the main effort thing, so we had the bank inside our fob, so I had to let all these people in. I also had the PRT there where we cooked up this idea about driver's license, whatever. I had to have a lot of flow into the fob. Anyway, so I was like, I don't want searchers. I don't want female searchers. Like, a female unit is not, no, like, I have super good chi, and you don't understand, and they're gonna mess it up, and like, no. And they're like, listen, Captain, like, you're doing it. Okay. So I was like, put them over there. This is a word for shun. Whatever. Anyway, so we did that, and they're searching people. And then, of course, I think it was like pretty soon, like one got blown up, right? And then also a sergeant major. So then I was like, okay, they're in the club, right? because it's about, right, the first standard is commitment. Like, are you committed to give the full measure? It's not like 3 pull-ups or 20 pull-ups. Like, how many times can I do this? No, it's about commitment. And are you prepared to give the full measure? And if you are prepared to give the full measure, then you're in the club. You're in the inner circle. You're in the war tribe. You're around the fire, right? And so it is with great shame that I said that was not right. That was morally wrong. And, so then I was like, this is going to be important to me for the rest of my career. Because really that's what we need. Now, well, you asked it. So another question to the answer about, we need people who are committed, and we need a lot of them. And it doesn't matter what their gender is, or their nationality, or their religion. When China has 50 million extra men, right? Like, we're not anywhere near the number of people we need fully committed. Anyway, so that's why I'm in the WPS. Thank you for allowing me to dig up that very painful story.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. This has been a great discussion, and I hope it's the beginning. And whether allyship is the right word or not, it is about being good humans, but consciously, it's action. What do you need to do to make your teams better? How do you need to get those diverse opinions and ideas and thoughts? And how do you pull them out of people? So hope this gives you some food for thought, and thank you for joining us.